Hi there, and welcome to Scheduling Fate. I'm Jamie McGee. I'm an author, astrologer, and I love helping those around me unlock the magic within them and hidden in everyday moments. Here at Scheduling Fate, you're going to find grounded insight to help you co create with the beautiful, unfolding story of your life. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hi there, and welcome in. All right, so today is going to be a follow up on a previous episode that I had about shadow work. And in that episode, we talked about shadow work, but also an exercise that I did in my experience with that exercise. And I do want to thank all of you who have watched and listened to that episode and shared your personal stories with where you are on that process. But in the aftermath of this shadow work, there were some things that came up for me. And I was thinking to myself that if you've done this work, if you're about to do this work, or if you've done some other kind of work, then you may have had a similar circumstance. And by knowing that you're not alone or recognizing that it's part of the process, that could be very helpful. And of course, with all these episodes, I do like to link them or tie them to astrology to give you even more opportunity to explore your energy, whether you're new to astrology or you're seasoned and can read your chart like a pro. So, with this episode, there is a link that will take you to schedulingfate.com. And in that article that you're going to find with this episode, we're going to talk about a chart signature. And the reason that I picked this topic to go along with the story that I'm going to tell you about the aftermath of that first engagement with this particular shadow work practice because by knowing how your particular energy would respond to this in normal circumstances, that will help you either lean in to what works for you and or realize that you have to go outside of your comfort zone and maybe approach it from a different perspective. And throughout several episodes, I have mentioned why you may not resonate with your sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, why astrology or the cookbook astrology, that high level didn't seem to land at home and you're still looking for reasons. And by no means is the chart signature going to give you all of the answers, but it's going to give you a good foundation. So before I get too twisted on this, let me explain what a chart signature is. Your chart signature is essentially the unique blueprint of your personality based on the key aspects in your astrology chart. It's not just about your sun, moon, and risings, although they are a huge part of it. It's about the entire energetic combination of elements and modalities and the way the planets interact with your chart. Kind of think of it like a cosmic blueprint. No one else in the world has the exact same chart as you. Your chart signature, you may find people who have the same quote unquote modality and element, but how you engage it is completely unique to you. And I'll give you a personal example. I have a water sun sign. It's fixed. It's a fixed water energy. And if I were to put those two together with keywords, it would tell you that I have a lot of emotions, a lot of depth, and I'm really locked in. It's hard for me to move out or around those. I'm kind of in the soup or the swamp of that energy, processing it on a psychological level. However, my chart signature is immutable fire. I have a lot of passion, a lot of fire, a lot of intention, and I like to see the little details and let it expand my mind and take me into this broad spectrum. And I love to teach what I find on that personal journey. Why are those two different for me? Well, my sun sign is the only personal water planet that I have. Uranus is also in water, but those are the only two that I have as far as my angles and my planets that are in water and that are in those fixed signs. Everything else falls in a different territory. So when you go to the article on schedulingfate.com, and we'll talk more about unpacking your chart signature at the other end of this episode, what you're essentially doing is tallying up where your elements and modalities are. You have 4 fire signs, you have 2 water signs, and you have 1 earth sign, etc. Then you're predominantly fire. And if you know that you're predominantly fire and you know that your modality is predominantly fixed, then you may know that it's easy for you to get locked inside of something, locked inside or fixated on this certain passion, which can be very powerful if you're bringing something to life, an entrepreneurship, a book, and a movie, whatever you're creatively wrapping yourself around, that can be very powerful. But if you are locked in while you're doing something like shadow work, then it would probably behoove you to step into a different way of approaching that energy altogether. So you can see how this can be very helpful. And again, we're going to talk more about a chart signature. But first, I want to give you this reflection about shadow work. Now, anytime you engage a change in your life, whether that is physical, spiritual, emotional, anything that you take out of your normal vibration, you are going to go into some sort of detox. And by no means am I an expert on this or claim to be an expert on this. This is one friend talking to another friend, asking you to reflect on every single time you have changed your diet or you have dropped a habit, whether that was a coffee habit or something more severe, every time you have broken out of a toxic friendship or relationship or social group or outgrown a work environment. I'm inviting you to reflect on some of the things that happened for you around that period of time. And the reason that I'm doing that is because when you engage shadow work, when you turn around and look at the thing that you've either been carrying consciously or unconsciously, or you've been ignoring because it just was easier to do, you are going to engage in some kind of detox and some kind of spiritual test. So I do want to take a couple of seconds to talk about detox, whether it's physical or emotional. It's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. You almost think that this must be wrong. I should not drop this habit or this situation because if it's bad for me and I stop doing it, then I should feel amazing. I mean, that's the linear line of logic, but that's not how it works out. Ask anybody, reflect on anything in your life, and you're going to understand what I'm talking about here. This situation is going to parallel spiritual tests or emotional purges that you go through when you're engaging any kind of shadow work or even just setting intentions. The intention that I'm going to do this going forward. Like when you engage positive manifestation, you say, I'm going to attract all these, resources into this 3D element. And then all of a sudden a bill shows up and you're like, well, that doesn't work. Positive manifestation did not work because this showed up and then you end up in a spiral. It's the same kind of circumstances. When you detox your physical body, you may have headaches or fatigue or digestive issues, really irritable because you have your mood is swinging all over the place. When you detox on a spiritual level, you're having to dive into old wounds and you could feel emotionally drained or tired, again, very irritable because you're just sitting there in a room that is safe and calm by all means, but your emotions or your subconscious has churned up something and you're like, you know what? I thought that was a trigger, but this is the trigger. And one way or the other, you're flushing out the toxins. And if you consider an emotional detox, breaking up with someone or a situation, you may go through crying spells. If you're a crier, you could have emotional outbursts of anger and sadness or feeling really overwhelmed by the situation when you realize how long you took a knee or you surrendered to this situation and what you need to break out. You may feel better right when you have that emotional breakthrough or breakout. Like I said what I said and I meant it. But there's going to be a time where you have to process, where you have to pack up things. And you have to understand, wow, we really did build something and it wasn't all bad. There were good times. There were beautiful moments in this situation, but it morphed into something else. And then there's this guilt and this regret. And maybe I should have done it this way. Why wasn't it working with us? Social detoxes are the same way. When you have to break away from people that maybe you're with because you feel like they needed you or they reminded you of someone else or they were a reflection of something you're trying to work on. And when you have to break out of that, you could feel a little disoriented. You could feel confused about who you are. You may even feel really lonely and confused as you try to unpack certain things. That's also something that happens when you engage shadow work. And when you go through a mental detox, when you really dive into spiritual work or you try to work on manifesting, noticing what you're consciously and unconsciously bringing into your vibration and into your energy and what you need to change, there could be a time where you're just really out of it, disconnected, hard to focus because you're so focused on what you're thinking that you can't think about anything. You can feel just a little bit out of control. And again, when you go through this shadow work, you may find moments of doubt or confusion. And again, it's self criticism. So, in the recent episode, and if you haven't listened, I definitely encourage you to do that. I talked about an exercise where you can write down things that you were told to believe about yourself as a child. Not necessarily from parents or grandparents or teachers. Maybe it was the product of your community, your friendships, or something that happened to you at one point in your life and you carried it through. And then on the bottom, you were to write what is actually true or the true that you are building and then process that energy. Now, the thing about doing something like that is it stirs up everything that we've just talked about. You start thinking about these memories and you come back to those situations where maybe you do remember that you grew up in poverty and your parents had their own demons that they were fighting. But as human beings, based on what they knew, they did the best of their ability in that situation. And when you take a second to step back and not see it through the eyes of a child, but a bigger perspective, maybe who you were when your parents were that age and what choices that you made. And maybe you made all the right choices. You had better circumstances for whatever reason. Maybe you stood on their shoulders and you were able to make better decisions, or you learned from their mistakes, which in essence is standing on their shoulders. So you did not have your children in the same situations. That when you start to do that, you're able to release blame. And then you're able to say, you know what? Every single day was not all bad. There were days when I got to do this event. Or every time we went here, we had this or that. Like you remember certain foods or certain aspects. And you start to understand that though a lot of it has marked you in one way or the other, and it's a shadow that you carry, there were good points. And when you take a second to realize those good points, that helps you unpack the idea that you cannot abolish your shadow. We are meant to dance with the shadow and the light within us to understand why we have those unconscious and conscious patterns. What are we carrying through our emotional, our physical family tree, and how do we change that and grow from it? So the generation that we're bringing up can stand on our shoulders and grow in a different direction. And though I'm talking about this process as if it's crystal clear, you wrote this down, then you're going to start to remember these things. You're going to go through this nostalgia and da 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 da. It did not happen that way for me at all after I did this list. And just to give you some insight into my life, I think everyone has a degree of anxiety. I think it's just part of humanity and being on this planet, the will to live, fight or flight. It's just part of it. And I had anxiety throughout my life, just going through school like anyone else. But between my two children, and I wouldn't even call it postpartum because it was after the initial postpartum, but between my two children, I had severe anxiety, a high level stress job, a lot of things. It wasn't a comfortable period of time. And I always remember thinking that my son was my savior because as soon as he came in, like it washed away. And since then, over the last 20 years, I have had highs and lows. I've worked with that energy and recognized it when it came in. I've had grounding tools, spiritual tools. In other words, I'm able to see it coming in and I know how to ride the storm out and to process it. At least I like to give myself credit in saying that I do. But right after I did this process, just a few days after that, I had this overwhelming flood of that anxiety and that heavy weight and trepidation. And it reminded me of who I was decades before. And it drove me crazy as an astrologer because my chart was not popping off saying, hey, watch out, brace for this. And collectively, yeah, there were some things that were coming in. I could have been picking up on something collectively that was coming in, something in my environment. I have no idea. But I was like, why do I feel this way? And as I was using my tools, trying to ground, trying to be present, asking myself, where is this coming from? What do I need to do to process it? I started to think about, who I was when this first came up. And then that took me on a lily pad back further through my life. And I began to understand where I surrendered my power, where I casted my attention. And it came to my awareness that a lot of times when I am overwhelmed with anxiety, it's because my attention is more outwardly focused than inwardly focused. And around this particular period of time, I was just doing what most people do when I had free time. I was scrolling along on my phone and I didn't realize how much of that information that I wasn't even paying attention to was getting absorbed into my vibration, into my energy. And which in and of itself was a beautiful lesson. And I would love to say, okay, that was the end of the story. The shadow work didn't turn up anything else besides some anxiety. I'm doing great. It capped up here. I want to give you guys some more astrology. We're going to move on. But it's not. A lot more things happen. One more note that I want to talk about is that the universe uses all of its tools. And currently, Mercury is in retrograde. It's in retrograde in Leo. And then my chart, that has to do with royalties. It has to do with creativity. And out of nowhere, I got an email from one of my publishers saying, hey, your rights and permission are still active here and you need to change this. And I was frustrated because honestly, I was on my way to meditate because I'm still consciously working on not getting overwhelmed with anything that I've stirred up from my past or in the shadow work. But I got a little frustrated because I didn't really take time to do it. But I sat down and I realized in order for me to do this, I had to go get out an old device, an older computer, because that's where everything was saved. And before the night was over, I had two old computers and an iPad out trying to trace where I had done something because that was another thing that was frustrating. I knew that I had done it and I had done it accurately and somewhere someone else had dropped the ball, but I had to have the proof. But what happened? That's a Mercury retrograde signature right there. But what happened is as I opened some of these old laptops, those laptops were frozen in time in some way or another because the Google Calendar, the Safari Calendar was popping up, meeting invites and showing up for this and instant messengers for people and situations that I definitely haven't spoken to in at least a year. And some of them even further back than that. And as I saw those people, as I saw those names, as I saw those conversations, another flood of that shadow came up. And in that moment, already being frustrated, even more disdain for the situation came up because I realized in that moment that though when I wrote down my list, I was thinking of my childhood, I realized that the best that my parents could do, are my teachers, my peers that didn't know any better because they were kids in that situation. Those things were tiny little seeds. And I carried those seeds throughout my life. And more times than not, I took a knee. I bowed, I surrendered my power to someone or something else in this 3D realm. And because I had done so, I had all of these energies that we're talking about with detox swell up. I had regret that I had given them my time. I had regret that I had been vulnerable or I had wanted to be with that organization or that situation because I wanted to help even more people. That it wasn't even about me, it was about other people. I had all of this energy flooding up. It was like 3 lives connected. My life as an astrologer, my life as an author, and who I am becoming now, which is a who knows, right? All merging together. And I wasn't the nicest person as my husband and daughter were trying to help me find my passwords because I hate passwords, especially when the computer tells me it's the wrong one and I know it is the right one. That's another story. I was very grumpy. I was unhappy and I was intense. And a night that was meant to be spent watching a moon begin to get closer to being full and grounding underneath the stars turned into this. And once it was over, once I had the emails sent out and the proofs sent out, I found myself kind of coming off the mountain there and apologizing. I'm sorry I was a grump. I didn't mean to be a grump. Like, wow. And then reflecting on how I must still be carrying some kind of shadow around particular stories in my life because it was that easy to trigger me, to bring that back up. Then I tied it right back around to this shadow work. I had to recognize that it was still there. I had to look it in the eye and learn from it. And I also had to give myself space to offer forgiveness for myself and maybe for those people that I could grow even more from these situations. And decades down the road, I'm gonna be like, you know what? They were a great lesson. If they had not treated me or the situation or whatever the way that they had, then this would not have happened. I would not have been able to help this person. And this person was able to change the world or able to change someone else's life. It doesn't even have to be changing the lives of the masses. It's changing the life of one person, that awareness, that clarity that says, you know what? You're on purpose and you're on time. And I got you. I'm here for you if you need it. Let's move forward. Whether that is a human being, an animal, you name it, that is the purpose. We're here to leave it better than we found it. And I get closer and closer to that situation with each day. But this shadow work that I did, this list helped me realize where the seeds were. But as I'm going through this detoxing situation and all these things are starting to come up, first it was the anxiety without knowing what the anxiety was attached to because my logical brain could not attach it. And then second, it was actually seeing the names and the situations and remembering both good times and bad times, but ultimately where it ended and how that has influenced maybe some of the decisions or actions that I have. Do I have trust issues? Do I judge people who have similar energies before they've had a chance to prove themselves to be trustworthy or untrustworthy? It was a great reflective practice when I finally did make it to meditate. I was able to take this piece by piece and process it and say, you know what? I'm still carrying that, but I'm going to work through that. And of course, tying this back to the chart signature, I know in my signature that I have to realize the nitty gritty details, the little data points, and then I have to grapple the wisdom of it. And I have to understand it well enough to teach it or explain it to someone else to grow through it. The knowledge is the gift for me. And if I do that, because my energy is predominantly mutable, I can transform where I am to where I want to go. And it's not a one and done deal. It's definitely a dance. These situations are going to come up again. At some point or another, I'm going to have to go back and make sure that I have my receipts and everything is processed with my books and the rights are in the right place. And when I do that, I'm going to come across old faces of people that I once adored, but then saw a different side of, or situations that I used to live for, but now I understand that I was surrendering to them. I gave them my power instead of balancing it in a true Platonian way. So, again, the reason for this episode is one, to do a little bit of follow up on the shadow work. And I would love to know, you don't have to comment if it's too private. You can definitely reach out how you're doing with your shadow work, but also to give you a tool to say, okay, this is my overall chart signature. How can I use those two elements to embrace this work that I'm trying to do, this inner work that I'm trying to do? Because the more you look within, the clearer the answers that you need will represent themselves in the world around you. Okay, so as I mentioned in past episodes, listing every sign, every element, etc., it kind of gives you that zone out look. I feel like a history teacher just writing facts on the board, asking you to memorize them. You will learn better by having an article and being able to find your elements and your modality and piece it all together. And that's what the article at schedulingfate.com is going to help you do. But I want to explain this just a little bit further before you're off on your way of doing your own little spiritual homework and saying, okay, this is how I'm going to engage the shadow work. Now, the overall chart signature, what we're doing in essence is we're saying, here's all of your planets. Here's the element that they're in. Here's the modality. Now, the modality is the action that they take. And then you have yourself a little sentence there and you say, okay, this is what is natural to me when I engage these things. So we're going to go through a few of these elements or something that's connected to nature. So that is fire, earth, air, and water. And then the modalities are connected to the action. So we have cardinal, which begins something. We have fixed, which holds on to something. And then we have mutable that transitions. And a good way to remember those is by thinking of the seasons. Every season has an initiating. We're in this season, then we get locked in that season, and then we have to transform and move into a new one. So, we're going to talk about the natural reaction and the best approach when you're working through any kind of transition. It doesn't have to be shadow work. It could be just having a bad day, a relationship, applying for something, doing something. The natural reaction and the best approach for each of these. So if you have a predominant fire energy, that's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, your natural reaction is to rush to fix something with action to try to outwork or outrun the challenge. And I definitely find myself doing that with the fire energy. So when you are stuck inside of something like this, the best approach is to slow your pace. Channel your frustration into healthy outlets. Exercise, be creative, and remember that stillness is productive. And just to give you another parallel personal example, I was trying to embrace stillness to unpack this situation. So that's an example of how you would want to do the best approach if you feel like what's natural is not working. Now, if your chart signature has heavy earth, that's Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, you naturally want to clamp down. You want to double down the workload. You get really rigid in the habits and you hold it together. Like, nope, this has always worked. I'm going to keep doing it. There's no reason to change it. We don't need any outside woo woo stuff. We're going to keep rocking and rolling. But one of your best approaches may be to loosen your guard and to ground yourself in nature and trust the process. Trust that just because you can't see something, that doesn't mean something is not happening. Give things the space that they need to change and shift organically inside of you, but also in the world around you. Now, if your chart signature is heavy in Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, your natural reaction could be to be too much in your head, like you overthink, or you're going to crowdsource advice. And that's a little bit dangerous in our current times because if you look up one thing, your entire algorithm is flooded with it and not necessarily with the experts or very clean, authentic content. I'm not saying that creators have bad intentions. I'm telling you that they're sharing their story, but maybe there's more research that you can find. You may find that you're spinning all the different possibilities without acting out, like you're living 1,000 lives inside of your head while you're sitting still. Your best approach may be to limit mental noise, focus on one step at a time, and reconnect with your body and stay anchored in reality. And I have some of these modalities in my chart, and that's exactly why I stopped the social media and I tried to meditate and be more present with the situation. Now, if you have a strong water signature, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, your natural reaction to these kinds of situations are to sink in deep into the emotion and feel victimized or withdrawn completely. Now, we all have every one of these elements. And even though I have a sun sign here, but it's not part of my overall signature, I could have easily felt victimized. I could have easily felt betrayed. I could have easily had all of this swelling, deep, dark emotion come up with the anxiety that I couldn't name or this reflection of how far I have come. But the best approach with this energy is to practice emotional quote unquote hygiene. Journaling is therapy, creative expression. Learn to feel safe in perspective and appreciate, wow, I used to really be hung up on that situation and now I'm not. And wow, look how far I have come. Find the emotional wins that you can lean forward with. Now, this is only half of this. On the site, you'll be able to tally up the element, but I also want to give some time to talk about the modality. Again, modality is the action. So if you find that you have predominant cardinal energy, that's going to be energy wrapped around Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. Your natural reaction to almost any situation is to start something new as a solution, even before the old issue is resolved. So screw it. I don't need to make sure the books are published. I'll just publish some more. Or I don't really care about the books because I'm over here podcasting now or something. The natural tendency is to move on, to move, outrun it, to move as fast as you can. But the best approach is to pause before you pivot into something different. Finish what's in front of you so you don't drag even more old lessons into those new chapters. If you try to skip over steps in whatever situation that you're working in, that new situation that you're creating, those same steps are going to be there until you actually walk them. Now, if you have a lot of fixed energy, and this would be energies in Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, your natural reaction is to dig in, to lock in, resist a change, even if it's very clear that it has to change. Like the entire world has crumbled around you. You're still standing there. The entire company has crumbled around you. And you're sitting here going, I'm the longest employee. I've been here the longest, but everyone else was wise enough to jump ship when they needed to, and you're still there. Or you're still struggling with the same relationship topics, not wanting to work through them because it is what it is. It's how you're made. When others have either done the work or the therapy with their partner or their situation, or they've moved on to a situation that is more compatible. So your best approach is to acknowledge what is in your control because it's not all in your control, fixed signs. I know that's hard to swallow. And release what's not. Movement, even small, is going to break some stuck energy. If you're locked into something, what little change can you make? Can you take a right instead of a left? Can you go get coffee at a different place? Can you go to a different social media platform? Listen to different types of music. No matter how little it is, if you have a strong, fixed energy, you're going to be able to make a huge impact with little changes that will lead to big changes. Now, if you have a strong chart signature wrapped around mutable energy, this is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. You naturally have a little bit of scattered energy. You often change your plans, or one version of you makes plans, and the other version of you is saying, why the hell did I make those plans? I don't want to go hang out with those people. You could distract yourself. You don't want to deal with this. So there's a degree of procrastination, or you feel overwhelmed. You have so many things to do that you're stunned. You don't know how to move forward with something. And you have a hard time getting through the test phases. Because if you begin something and it bites back, you're like, well, that's a sign I should move out of this. I can move into a different space. It's a test saying, do you really want to go through this transition? Do you really want to move in this direction? Are you tired of carrying that weight? If you are, pass this test and we'll move forward. So your best approach is to pick one grounding practice, even just one, and stick with it. Ride out the discomfort instead of escaping from it. Be present in the moment, pass the test, and that's going to give you a lot of success in working through any situation that you're trying to conquer. So, in conclusion of this episode, if you've done any type of shadow work, engaged in any kind of habit changing form, this episode's purpose is to help you realize that sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. I'm not really sure where that quote came from, but I know it's popular. That you have to go through a bit of a dark night of the soul or a shadow, something that's uncomfortable. But what's on the other side of that is definitely worth it. It's a process that you want to go through. And I also wanted to give you some tools, your chart signature, and let you see, okay, this is how I would normally engage this. This is how I nurture and hold myself. How can I use that And if that doesn't serve a great purpose for what I'm trying to do, what would be my best practice? And I definitely hope that that goal was served. I look forward to hearing from you, whether that is a like, subscribe, or comment, or if you're just reaching out and letting me know how you are on your journey. Of course, at schedulingfate.com, you're not only going to find a lot of articles like the one attached to this episode, but you will also find reports that'll help you tap into your personal natal chart, information about how you can look up your personal natal chart, and the ways that you can work with me, whether you send me a question and I send you a recorded answer back, or we sit down and talk in a Zoom call. All right. As always, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for every single one of you that take the time to listen to this information and walk on this journey of self discovery and making time to schedule that faith, that purpose, that reason that you're here, being very present. Okay. See you next time.